and more sludge. Not a ton of water damage or rust in here, which is impressive considering we drained 2.5 gallons of water out of this crankcase right after we brought it home. Suction bell down there, oil pump on the far side. Got some sludge settled out in the bottom, but I suppose that's to be expected. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are going to get the oil pan put on 1113's engine today. Here it is, original pan from 1113. It's been cleaned up, inspected, ready to go. Side covers cleaned, made new gaskets for those. Bunch of new hardware prepped and ready right there. A bunch more hardware prepped and ready here. New plugs, new gaskets purchased when possible. It's all ready to go. Let's get to it. So if you've been following this rebuild series, you'll undoubtedly remember we have two pickup screens on the D3400 engine, and you can see where they reside. Main one down in the main sump, and then that smaller one at the front in this shallower sump where oil can get picked up and then returned down to the main. And you can see this rather heavy baffle that's in here. You can see that compartment goes way up in the front, just about up to here. That big baffle just kind of further keeps oil around this main sump if the machine should pitch down at the nose, and then, you know, anything that accumulates up here or runs up there is promptly returned back to the main where it can be picked up and used for lubrication purposes. Probably the main thing to look for damage on these oil pans is this spring perch area right here. That main spring that goes from track frame to track frame contacts the pan right here, and of course the entire weight of that engine pretty much is riding right here on that spring, and it's not uncommon to see this area develop some cracks where it rides on that spring perch. Fortunately, I think 1113 is a fairly low hour machine. It all looks very, very good in this area, but I pulled this old pan out of the scrap pile. That's why it's rusty. It's been down there for a few years. This one is pretty horribly damaged in that area there. This is the pan that was on 5U7066, later known as the Iron Mistress, and I think she had a pretty rough life back in her day, but you can see we have fairly good crack line going right there, another one going right through there, and then it even follows and extends back through here. Needless to say, that was seeping quite a bit of oil onto that mainspring area. And D2s, and I've also heard D4s, are kind of known for the pans cracking in that area on higher hour machines that have had a rough life. But thankfully, we don't have to worry about that with 1113. And as long as I've got the pan on the bench, I also want to show you guys the engine oil dipstick. Now, it's a dipstick, right? Full, low, pretty self-explanatory. Looks like anything else you'd expect to see on anything. But not in the Caterpillar world. It is not that simple. So to explain why, we'll go into this book. Now this thing is like gold to me. Selected articles from Service Magazine's 1932 to 1950 Caterpillar Tractor Company. Now finding the page that I want to show you guys is the tough part, because I get quite distracted by all the early cartoon style tech tips that they had in here. You know, a wrench is enough, talking about braking crankshafts on vertical twin-cylinder starting engines, improved pre-cleaner things. I mean, this book is just packed full of just gold after gold after gold treasure on each page. So here we are. Get my bookmark out of the way. I want to show you guys checking oil levels. Operators' instruction books have always recommended that the crankcase lubricating oil level be checked soon after the engine is stopped and before the oil has had time to drain back from the oil cooler and other parts of the engine, which might result in the reading being inaccurate. Recent changes have been made so accurate oil level readings can be obtained with the engine running. A spray shield has been added to all diesel engines to protect the gauge from oil spray in the crankcase. You can see in their picture here, the dipstick goes down and it's shrouded by that tube so that all the turbulence and splashing oil when the engine's running doesn't skew the reading. At the same time, oil bayonet gauges were recalibrated so the full mark will indicate the correct level while the engine is running. Bayonet gauges in all engines having this new feature are stamped engine running between the full and low marks on the gauge. So Basically, we'll cut to the chase. Servicemen should call this to the attention of operators because a considerable quantity of oil is being circulated while the engine is running, and the oil level will be above the full mark when it is stopped. Likewise, if only enough oil is added to bring the level to the full mark when the engine is not operating, the level will be low when the engine is running. That went into effect on December 23rd, 1942. So, because 1113 is a 1938 model, she still has the old style gauge. Taking a look inside, you can see the dipstick gauge is not shrouded by anything. It's just right out here in the oil, and the full mark on the gauge is about a 1/4 inch below the bottom of this baffle plate right here. So while the engine is running, or just after it's been shut off, right about here would be your desired full oil level. So acknowledging human nature and realizing the fact that at the end of a long day, at the end of a working shift, what have you, a lot of operators, the majority of them in fact, had no intention of going and pulling the stick and checking the engine oil level right after they shut the machine off. It just didn't get done. What a lot of people were doing was checking the fluids before they would start it up, like you would do on anything else, and it was second nature. That's just what you did. Well, if it seemed overfull, sometimes they drain it because it had been sitting and the level in the pan increased. So they drain it down to the full mark, start the engine, and after oil circulated and filled everything back up, the engine oil level would actually be low. So what Cat did was just, again, retool their whole dipstick gauge setup. Instead of just changing where the full mark was on the stick to more accurately reflect where a full engine oil level would be on an engine that's been shut off, they decided to change the procedure and make it so that you check the engine oil while the engine was running right after the initial start. Again, way more complicated than what an engine oil dipstick needs to be, but Cat just always liked to do things like that. Long story short, that new dipstick arrangement was a controlled means of overfill, is about what it is. And on my 5U D2, I noticed that after I've had the engine shut off, the oil level is about an inch above the full mark, where it would be full with the engine running. Even my RD6 is the same way. So that would bring you up just over the top of this baffle plate here. And even if you overfill like 1113 like that, which I will likely do initially, knowing that the level will drop, you're still not going to be full enough to get into like the rod's crankshaft. It won't be picked up. It won't be circulated around. So it'll be just fine. And of course, with 1113, being that we still have the old original style dipstick gauge in it, I'm just going to kind of pay attention to it, monitor it, and feel it out. Like with anything else, it's going to have its own personality. It's going to be different from other machines that I have, and I'll just eventually know about where I need to see the oil reading on the stick on a cold engine that's been sitting, so that we don't have to do all this fussing around. And again, like the operators back in the day, I really have no intention of checking the engine oil after I shut the engine off every time. Anyway, after sitting through 6 minutes of some guy talking about a dipstick, magical thing this YouTube is, engine oil pan gasket, one of the few I was able to buy brand new, 7H2415, current number on that. And I'll tell you what, this just feels like cheating right here. I don't even have to make it first. I'm not even really sure what to do, other than we'll just cut it open, see what there is to see. Okay, let's just see all the puzzle pieces fit here. I think this day and age, this puzzle is rated for ages 55 and up, in case you were wondering. At first I thought it was a 4-piece, looks like it's only a 3. I still say I could have made it in 2 with the stuff I've got. But interlock all that. Put that in, it's looking... Ooh, we got here. We got a hole here and a hole here that does not line up. Everything else good all the way around except for here. Okay, so we got there's a hole and there's a hole about there and there. Instead we got holes there and there. So, okay, Mr. Caterpillar, I think I could have done better than that. Let's check. Okay, since this is an old pan, 1113 is a 1938, this is the 1938 pan. This is first gen stuff here, and we have an engine block that this pan is going to go onto that had who knows what on it before. I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to test and see how these two holes line up with the engine block that this pan is slated to go on. Alright, the area in question is right here next to the oil pump, so I'll see if I can manipulate this on, all one-handed like. Line it up on those dowels, hold it in place. Okay, and the same two holes do not line up with what's in the block. Okay, again, it's like about there and about there. So, that makes me feel a little bit better. The block bolt pattern at least matches what's on the pan. No big deal. We can just disregard that hole and that hole. They're rather inconsequential. It's certainly not going to make it leak, and I'll just have to pop two holes, one there and one there, to make this thing work. So I guess not the end of the world. Okay, so I think I know what's going on with those holes in that pan gasket that don't quite line up. What I did was just, like I said, abandoned those two holes that did not line with anything, and then I popped a hole right there where I need it to be, and a hole right there where I need it to be. Basically, here's what's going on. I checked all my manuals, and everything through the end of 5J production should have had this bolt pattern that I had to create on this gasket. But when you get to the 5U series, and they updated that block to a 4-inch bore, it went from the D3400 to the D311. You can see they added a couple bolts that go from top down, there and there, whereas all the bolts in this pan are all through holes. We'll come over once again to this old cruddy pan that was on 7066, which was a D311. And without getting the gasket too nasty, you can see that the one original hole that does not line up in 1113's pan has a threaded opening right there, and then that other hole that did not line up is also a threaded hole. Those are not through holes. So that is the difference. Come back over here real quick. This 7H2415 is what the gasket number crossed to that I gave them. I gave them the number for the old 5J block. It crosses to that most recent number. What I think is going on is they basically have superseded all of the 5J stuff up to the 5U as far as this pan gasket, because I think they're out of the old 5J ones with the correct bolt hole pattern, and with a little, probably a little asterisk in the parts computer that, you know, may fit or close enough will work. They're just selling these D311 oil pan gaskets in their place, probably till they exhaust those stocks, and then that'll probably be another gasket that's no longer available at all through Caterpillar. So no big deal. We move on. Okay, gasket's in place. Sealer has been applied. Normally I use the lift to manipulate this, but I think I can do it without it. You want to grab that front there? There. A little help from Senior, saving the day. Lying down the dowels. Fingers out. There. It's all the way down. Put the bolts in now. Just hand starting the 8 billion bolts that go around the pan. I mean, we don't want to go more than 2 inches without putting another bolt in. That might be a little structurally deficient, you know. Oh, the fun of it. I can't imagine doing this on flat rate in a modern shop, because you know they'd never pay you enough time. That's why this is so much fun. Alright, I got all the pan bolts tight. Went all the way around. Installed very, very well. Didn't give me any problems at all. You can see that nice clean looking suction screen in there. I still can't believe that that pump and that pan and everything cleaned up as well as it did after we drained the gallons of water out of this that we found in her right after we brought her home. Oil pump nestled nice and cozy in there. Not a ton of excess room, but it all fits. And I want to take just a quick second here to answer a question that came up many times in the oil pump video a couple installments ago. If you remember, we had this adjustable thumb wheel knob here that sets the output pressure of the oil pump. Basically crank it in to increase pressure, crank it out to decrease pressure. Service manual calls for 30 psi on a warm engine, and there was a lot of people wondering how you would readjust that after the oil pan is on. So, two options. We can completely drain the oil out of the pan, take this side cover off, and have, boom, easy access right in there, right to that wheel. Put the side cover back on, fill it back up with oil, and away you go. What I will most likely do, and remember we're upside down here, so we'll correct things so it looks a little bit more accurate. I will go in through this rear crankcase access panel. It's much more convenient, and you could use either window, but I'll just go in through the back here. Just all you'd have to do is glove up. You wouldn't even have to drain the oil down, and boom, you're right there on that thumb wheel. Easy as that. So that's most likely what I will do. We'll get back to reality here. So not that big of a deal to get in there and to make that adjustment. Oil plug can go in next. Classic, great big old Caterpillar oil plug. If you pull this thing out, that crankcase is going to drain itself in about 3.5 seconds, so be ready. The copper gasket usually ends up looking all flat, smashed like that. You can get new ones yet. I buy these by the pound. We have a 0L-1124, that is the current number. Pop that right on there. And that's ready to go in. Final two pieces to round out this video. We got the two side covers for the oil pan, dipstick cover, and then just the flat one. Pretty easy to know which one goes where because the dipstick cover has this little bump right here. That other one doesn't. Dipstick cover goes next to the oil pump. You can see that little accent feature there. Flat one goes over here. Simple as that. Just starting the last bolt right now, and I'm only going hand tight with the bolts on both of these covers. Reason being, I plan on having those off again before there's any oil put in the crankcase. I will explain. Because I had this block completely gutted, liners out, everything resealed, when the time comes to start dumping fluids in this, I'm going to leave the oil out of it. I'm going to fill everything with coolant. I want to be able to pop these two side covers off quickly and make sure nothing is leaking down into the crankcase. I would hate to have water get mixed with oil and circulate throughout the system. Causes a heck of a mess. So just out of an abundance of caution, both these covers are just hand tight just to keep the dirt out for now. And also forgot to mention, I just made the gaskets that go under both of those side covers. Did not even check to see if they were available from Cat, because for what I can get that bulk gasket material for, I got maybe 10 cents worth of material in there, and they were simple, just begging to be knocked out. So that's the route I went there. Just something heavy duty about that pan. All those bolt heads, all those covers. Looks rather up-armored, I would say. I like it. So that concludes this video. Next video, the plan is to pop the crank pulley on, get the front radiator support put on. Should be able to handle those two things easy. After that, the big bell housing piece will go on the back, and it's ready to be flipped right side up to continue on. So I know another long-winded video. Kind of had a little bit of a snafu with that pan gasket, but nothing we couldn't overcome, so no harm, no foul. As always, guys, thanks for following along. Thanks for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. Tune in again. We're going to make 11-13 gain a little more weight next time.